You know what's worse than a breakup? It's when you're grieving someone you never even dated. Sounds ridiculous, right? You can't break up with a fantasy, but somehow it hurts just as much, sometimes even more. Because in your mind, you already built the whole movie. You imagined the relationship, the late-night talks, the trips together, maybe even the family dinners, and then reality hits. That story never actually existed. It only lived in your head, and now you're left trying to let go of someone who was never really yours. So, letting go of someone you never had isn't about pretending it didn't matter. It's about realizing it mattered enough to teach you something, but not enough to keep you stuck. Stop waiting for someone to pick you. Start choosing yourself, because the truth is, the right person won't just be a character in your imagination. They'll actually show up, take your hand, and walk beside you in real life. And when that happens, you'll look back and think, why on earth was I holding on to someone who was never mine in the first place? When you think about why it hurts so much to let go of someone you never actually had, it usually comes down to this. You're not letting go of the person. You're letting go of the fantasy you built around them. And fantasies are powerful. Think about it. In your mind, you've probably already written the script of how things could have been. You pictured the cute moments, the texts that would have made you smile, the adventures you would have taken together, even the future milestones, holidays, anniversaries, maybe even growing old together. All of that existed in your imagination, and it felt real enough that your heart got invested. But here's the thing, they never promised you that. They never committed to being the person in that story. You were both characters in your own head, not in real life. This is why it feels so painful, because you're mourning a relationship that never actually existed outside of your thoughts, and because it never existed, you can't point to concrete memories to process. You can't say, we broke up after 3 years, or we tried, but it didn't work. All you have is the gap between what you wanted to happen and what actually happened. That gap is what hurts. But here's where your freedom lies. If what you're really holding on to is the fantasy, then you also hold the power to rewrite it. You created this story, you gave it energy. And just as easily, you can choose to put down that pen and stop writing lines for someone who was never acting in the play. That doesn't mean your feelings weren't valid. They absolutely were. It means you finally recognize what you were attached to wasn't the person standing in front of you, but the role you cast them in. When you see that clearly, it changes everything. Suddenly, you realize you're not losing a relationship, because one never existed. What you're losing is an illusion, a projection of what might have been. And while illusions can feel intoxicating, they are not the same as reality. Reality is someone who shows up, someone who invests in you, someone who doesn't leave you guessing about where you stand. That's the kind of story you actually deserve. So, when you're brave enough to release the fantasy, you also open the door to someone who wants to be in your life, for real, not just in your imagination. One of the biggest traps we fall into when we're holding on to someone we never had been mistaking potential for proof. Potential is intoxicating. It's the what-if game. What if he realizes one day how amazing I am? What if she finally wakes up and sees that I was right here all along? What if, what if, what if? Those 3 little words can keep us hooked on a story that never gets written. Potential is like staring at an empty canvas and imagining the most beautiful painting, but never actually picking up the brush. It's all in your head. Proof, on the other hand, is action. It's not what they could do, it's what they're actually doing right now. And when you stop and look honestly at their behavior, the truth usually becomes painfully clear. They're not showing up, they're not investing, they're not proving anything. We convince ourselves that if we just wait a little longer, or if we give a little more, or if we become a slightly better version of ourselves, then maybe they'll finally step up. But the reality is, someone who truly wants you won't need all of those conditions to be met before they act. They'll want to make it known. They'll take you out, they'll prioritize your time, they'll make an effort to get closer, not just every now and then when it's convenient, but consistently. The difference between potential and proof is consistency. A person's potential might show in flashes. A sweet text here, a flirtatious glance there, maybe a random deep conversation that makes you feel like there's something more. And we cling to those flashes like they're evidence of a hidden truth. But they're not. They're sparks, not fire. Proof doesn't make you question. Proof doesn't leave you analyzing every little thing they said, wondering if they secretly feel the same way. Proof is when their actions remove the question altogether. Proof is clarity, and that's what we all deserve: clarity, not confusion. When you keep holding on to potential, you're essentially betting on a version of them that doesn't exist. You're building your emotional home on a foundation that's not even there. No wonder it feels like it crumbles every time you lean on it. The hard but freeing truth is this: if they wanted to, you'd already know. If they were as invested as you wouldn't be living in a loop of maybe someday. Letting go means finally saying, I'm done waiting for proof where there is none. It means stepping out of the fantasy of potential and into the reality of someone who doesn't just have the capacity to choose you, but actually does. It's easy to look back on someone you never had and label the whole thing as a mistake, a waste of time, or even something to be embarrassed about. But the truth is, even those almost relationships, the ones that never fully bloomed into something official, carry lessons that can be incredibly valuable if you're willing to see them. Just because someone didn't end up as your partner doesn't mean they didn't play a role in shaping the way you understand love, attraction, or even yourself. Every connection, no matter how brief or incomplete, leaves clues about what you want, what you don't want, and what you're willing to tolerate. Maybe that person made you realize how deeply you can care for someone, how vulnerable you can allow yourself to be. That in itself is a beautiful thing, because it shows you're capable of giving love. A lot of people shut down and never open that door, but you did. Or maybe, on the flip side, they exposed patterns in your behavior that need attention, like how easy it was for you to ignore red flags just because you liked the way they made you feel in certain moments. Maybe you saw how quickly you gave away your emotional energy without requiring them to match it. That's not something to shame yourself over. That's something to learn from. Sometimes these almost relationships are like mirrors. They reflect back to us parts of ourselves we wouldn't have noticed otherwise. Maybe you saw how much you were craving validation, or how you were hoping someone else would fill the gaps in your own self-worth. Maybe you realized that you have a tendency to over-romanticize people, giving them credit for qualities they didn't really show. As painful as that realization might be, it's also one of the most powerful gifts you could receive, because it means you won't make the same mistake again. And let's not overlook the clarity it gives you about your standards. After experiencing the disappointment of someone who never stepped up, you can now say with certainty, next time, I need someone who shows up fully. I need someone who is clear about their intentions. I need someone who makes me feel chosen, not confused. That clarity is gold, because it saves you from wasting energy on half-hearted connections in the future. So even though it may not have been a love story you get to tell in a traditional sense, it was still a chapter that mattered. It mattered because it stretched you, it tested you, and it taught you. And when you walk away with the lessons instead of the illusion, you transform what once felt like heartbreak into fuel for the healthier, stronger, and more intentional love that's waiting for you. The hardest part of letting go of someone you never had is realizing how much space they've taken up in your mind. You replay conversations, dissect every glance, and imagine alternate scenarios where things went differently. It's like they became the main character of your story, even though in reality they weren't even showing up fully in theirs. And this is where the real shift has to happen. You need to reclaim your power by putting yourself back in the spotlight. Right now, it's as if you're giving away your stage to someone who doesn't even know their lines. They're not delivering, yet they're stealing all the screen time. You don't need to erase them with bitterness or anger. You just need to decide that the role of the leading character belongs to you again. When you stop making them the center of your narrative, everything changes. Instead of asking, "Why don't they want me?" you start asking, "What do I want for myself?" That shift is powerful because it takes you out of a place of waiting and puts you into a place of creating. You stop waiting for a text that may never come, and you start planning experiences that fill you with energy. You stop waiting for them to notice your worth, and you begin proving your worth to yourself by the way you treat your own life. That could mean pouring yourself into passions you put aside, reconnecting with friends who remind you of your value, or trying new things that excite you. The more you invest in yourself, the less room there is for someone who never truly invested in you. This isn't about distracting yourself. It's about building a life so rich, so vibrant, that someone who only offers crumbs no longer feels tempting. Imagine walking into a room where you're so full of your own joy, purpose, and energy that you don't need anyone to validate your presence. That's what happens when you shift the spotlight. People who are meant to be in your story won't be threatened by it. They'll be drawn to it. They'll want to stand beside you, not in the shadows, but as equals sharing the stage. The beauty of this approach is that it doesn't just help you move on. It elevates the kind of love you attract in the future. Because when you're the lead in your own life, you won't settle for someone who treats you like a side note. You'll naturally align with someone who sees your value, matches your energy, and wants to walk with you fully, not halfway. And that's the kind of relationship that doesn't just exist in your imagination. It becomes real because you chose yourself first. Letting go of someone you never had is not about denying the feelings you experienced. It's about honoring them while also recognizing they were built on a foundation that didn't exist in reality. Your emotions were real. The late-night daydreams, the butterflies, the anticipation every time you saw their name pop up on your phone. All of that was genuine, but the story you attached those feelings to was incomplete. And when you understand that, you stop punishing yourself for falling too hard or expecting too much. You give yourself permission to accept that you wanted connection, love, and intimacy, and that's not something to be ashamed of. It's something to be proud of. It proves your heart is alive and ready. The challenge, though, is learning not to confuse longing with reality, because when you cling to the illusion of what could have been, you deny yourself the chance to experience what is. The person you imagined isn't the person who showed up in your life. The proof of their actions never matched the potential you created in your mind. And so the healthiest, strongest decision you can make for yourself is to stop trying to force life to deliver on a script it never agreed to follow. You deserve clarity, consistency, and commitment, not confusion, mixed signals, and empty space. Letting go isn't failure. It's choosing to step out of a movie you were directing alone, so you can walk into a reality where someone actually shows up for the role you deserve. And when you shift the spotlight back to yourself, you begin to see how powerful you really are. You realize that you don't need someone else's approval to live fully. You can be the lead character of your own story, and when you embrace that, your energy changes. You no longer beg for attention, you attract it. You no longer wait for someone to make you feel worthy. You embody your worth so strongly that the right people have no choice but to recognize it. The moment you reclaim that power, you transform what once felt like loss into the very thing that propels you toward a brighter, more authentic love story. So, as you close this chapter, remind yourself of this. You are not walking away empty-handed. You're walking away with lessons, with clarity, with a stronger sense of who you are and what you want. And most importantly, you're walking away with the space to welcome someone who doesn't live only in your imagination, but in your reality. Someone who chooses you every single day, not just in your dreams. Letting go of someone you never had isn't the end of your story. It's the moment you take the pen back and begin writing the love story that was meant for you all along. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen and share this space with me today. I truly appreciate your presence, your energy, and your willingness to reflect on something so deeply personal and universal. If this message resonated with you, I hope you carry it with you, not as just words, but as a reminder of your strength, your worth, and your ability to write your own story. As we wrap up, remember, letting go isn't losing, it's making room for what's real, what's true, and what's meant for you. So be kind to yourself in this process, give yourself grace, and know that you are never alone in this journey. Thank you again for being here with me. Take care of yourself, keep choosing you, and until we connect again, good. Bye and much love.